then just to do what see them with their...
This is definitely one of my favorite topics. Economic growth. I know what really can I do about it, because it's a very, very specialized, part of our lives. But hey, let's talk about powering industries for economic growth. Now, the Rural Electrification Agency on Thursday signed an MOU with 5 private developers to scale up electricity access in the country. The plan is for them to supply something in the region of 1,265 megawatts capacity of decentralized rural electrification, decentralized renewable energy, on-grid or off-grid. That's what that is all about. Now, we have an estimated in Nigeria, an estimated 427 gigawatts of electricity through solar. What are we doing about them? How is this usable for us as a people to power our economic growth? Let's have the conversation this morning. 2 people who joined us this morning. Engineer Olafemi Olaniyan is here with me in the studio. He is a stakeholder management of the Nigeria Energy Forum. He's right here with me in the studio. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
I also have with us in Abuja studio, Ms. Ibironke Olubamiche, who is a National Coordinator, Global Environment Facility Small Grants Program. It's a program that's implemented by the United Nations Development. We'll let you meet her as soon as we have everything in place. Thank you, by the way, for joining us here, Engineer. So now, what would you say is our primary challenge in terms of in the area of powering industries for economic growth?
Thank you. I would say 2 very huge challenges. First of all, you must understand that industry requires bulk power. When I say bulk power, an average factory, for instance, producing, let's say, beverages, would require in the range of about 500 kVA, 500 kVA supply. Now, putting that kind of thing together is no small task. When you bear in mind that a community would consume that kind of power. So you need to move power in bulk for industries to benefit from them. Then, secondly, is cost. Cost. Power is not cheap. Power costs a lot of money to put together, and then you recoup the money over time. Unless you can provide an enabling environment where an investor can recoup his investment over about 20 years and not have to worry about whether policies will change, whether exchange rate volatility and things like that. So let's say funding. So those 2 things are huge constraints.
But perhaps that also speaks to the challenge of whether or not we are exploring all of the opportunities that we have. For instance, the solar power potential that Nigeria has is estimated to be about 427 gigawatts. In the course of the week, I think it was last week, we put up on our breakfast program the Kaduna windmill project that backs up to like 2004, 2005. And as we speak, it's still in its derelict state. There are those who say, okay, the government says they're going to do something about it, but we all know the story because we saw the visuals and it's as current as can be. This is Channels Television. We want to ensure that we're giving people the real information that they need at any given time. So that is there. So are we exploring all possibilities, or we're just trying to manage the low-hanging fruits, so to speak?
What you pointed out is perhaps the most common factor with government-initiated projects. I'll tell you why. A private sector man, or in the private sector, projects are driven by the economic viability, financial viability of the projects. Nobody is going to put a dime behind any project without being sure he can get his money back. Government doesn't have to do that. And that's why you see a government project conceptualized, very good on paper, but when it comes to delivering the project, it falls short because there's really no financial viability. And if you look around, you have so many projects. Look at Ajaokuta, for instance. Nigeria spent more than $10 billion in Ajaokuta, and it has not produced a kilogram of steel. So there are a lot of opportunities, but they have to be driven by the private sector. You have to create an enabling environment for the private sector to put its resources behind such opportunities. And there's a consensus now that renewables can be used for large capacity or large power demands, although many of them may need some form of hybrid. That means renewables and gas, or renewables and diesel, renewables and some other conventional energy source. So private sector is key for this to happen.
Okay. Well, Mrs. Olubamiche is in our Abuja studio. As I mentioned earlier, she is the National Coordinator, Global Environment Facility Small Grants Program. It's a project being implemented by the United Nations Development Program. Madam, thank you for joining us this morning. We've been listening to us, and thankfully you are a Nigerian. How does it feel when you see all of these gaps, and you see the potential, and then you see the capacity we have, and then you see all of the things that are happening?
Thank you very much, Mr. Ayo, for having me here again, and it's a pleasure for me to come and contribute my quota. The experts, engineer, has spoken about all the different areas, but I want to talk about how it dovetails down to the individual people on the streets. And like you know, I work with the communities. And when we know that the informal sector in Nigeria is almost about 50% of the economy in Nigeria. And we discover that it is even, I even want to believe that that is a very conservative percentage, really. And so the people that really need this energy are in the villages, in the communities. And even though it's little that they need, but that little actually drives the economy from the bottom up. And that is why it is very important that the government sees the opportunities. Fortunately for us in Nigeria, the opportunities abound for us to have this a combination of the different energy that we have access to naturally and also maybe through industrialization. Unfortunately, it's like we're still scratching the surface as far as harnessing the opportunities that we have to get engaged in renewable energy is concerned. We were talking about the budget of some ministries as far as energy is concerned recently, and everybody's like, okay, we want to buy solar, we want to buy solar. The idea is just to buy solar, but not. The idea is we are hoping and we are advocating that the idea is for Nigeria to look inward and see how we can generate, because the privileges are here, the opportunities are here for us to generate our own electricity. Even the natural one, we know that we even sell to other countries. How much more when we know that the wind is there, the sun is there, the water is there for us to generate electricity. And so this is what we are advocating, that we even have individuals in Nigeria. I was watching a video of a young man that used water to generate electricity using electric generator to generate electricity. Water, not gas, not petrol. So we have the privileges, we have the opportunities here to harness what we have. I think the government just, the Naseni, I'm so happy again now that, because some years back, Naseni was not anything to talk about as far as solar is concerned. But now, for years now, we know that they are manufacturing even this solar panel here in Nigeria. So the opportunities are here for us to harness what we have in Nigeria for the common man, because the economy depends on power more than any other thing in Nigeria. And right from the governments to the communities, the economy, the energy mix, we have the opportunity, we have to work on it.
You know, Madam, you're talking about renewable energy. There was this renewable energy plan that was launched in 2011. I'm sure you are aware of it. The plan of that, the master plan had in mind to increase the share of renewable energy to maybe 2015, by 2015 up to like 13%, up to like 23% by next year, 2025, and about 36% by 2030. Do you think that plan has taken off?
Well, I would not say that the plan has not taken off, because even to launch the plan alone is an effort in the right direction, if you will ask me. But what is the pace of implementing this plan? Who are the people involved in implementing this plan? And what is the commitment, the political will, and the environment, creating the environment for, like an engineer mentioned about the private sector. Is the environment conducive for even the private sector to explore the opportunity that comes from the plan that Nigeria has developed is another issue. But of course, we keep hope alive and hoping that the government, of course, knowing that the government has good intention. And so it is also, I think, another thing is for the government to have the right people who will give the right advice at the right time for the right thing to be done as necessary. So I think, well, we won't say that it is not, because our problem in Nigeria is not the lack of whether the law or the plan or the strategy, or it is the implementation. How are we moving in terms of the implementation is what is important.
You know, well, Engineer Olaniyan here said something the other time when I cited the example of the wind farm in Katsina, and he talked about the role of the private sector. Like, it's something that is left exclusively to government, you know, it needs the empowerment or the catalyst of a private sector to drive it to full implementation. And then there is organizations such as yourself, you know, championing certain things, civil society organizations, development industry generally, also working in this particular direction. It's interesting that we are talking about this in this particular way. So is that something that your own project is also targeting? I mean, renewable energy and all of that thing. What are the potentials? What are the opportunities in what parts of the country for economic growth?
Thank you very much. I can tell you categorically that over 30% of our project, we have 5 focal areas of operation, of supporting project. But over 30% of our focal areas actually, in fact, centers on energy. Energy mixed with climate change. You can't, even if we are supporting the women or the farmers in the communities, at some point they need energy, either for processing or even to transport the produce even to the market, and all that is very necessary. So what we are doing is to, number one, encourage communities to also come up with innovative ideas on how to have access to renewable energy. We have supported several projects in everywhere, in Lagos, in almost all the geopolitical zones in Nigeria, and letting people know that, yes, we are advocating for government to create an enabling environment. We are advocating for the government to make energy really accessible in terms of cost and accessibility to the communities. But at the same time, we are trying to see how, from the bottom up, the communities also, individuals, group, the youth especially, how they can come up to create innovative ways for access to renewable energy. Because renewable energy, of course, like we know, we can say that they are kind of infinite. The sun is there all the time, and we are so blessed in Nigeria. So we have supported a couple of projects to showcase that, yes, this is possible, because that is actually one of the focus of our program, is to support pilot projects to show that this is possible. And that is why Channels has invited myself and engineer, because there's a project that we supported in Lagos, on the island of Lagos State, that is helping these women who are selling fish, because before they get this fish, and because there is no cold room, there is no cold room. Number one, they have to look for firewood to be able to smoke the fish and keep it preserved until they are able to sell it. And so they are felling down trees, and then it's also affecting them health-wise and the financial-wise, and all in all manners like that. So what we did was to provide them with a cold hub on the one island in Lagos State. And since that time, the news have been there a couple of times. And since even that time, the news we are hearing is that it's now better for them. They can take this fish. I mean, this fish can be preserved for longer days before they are able to sell it. It also enhances their economic activity, because then, whereas they would have sold it at a giveaway price before, it is now because of the cold hub, they can keep the fish and the crayfish for some time, and then be able to add value to it before it is sold. So it is affecting the environment positively, affecting their health positively, and affecting their economic and livelihood positively. So we have a couple of many projects like that we have supported.
Well,
and
interesting.
We are still supporting.
Yeah, Engineer Lanio, well, while the industries might be benefiting, the small scale, nano and micros businesses might be benefiting, and if affecting them positively, I'm not sure how well it is affecting the pockets of medium and large corporations. Because you talked about the cost of electricity, cost of powering these industries. And there are those who would point to the fact that the cost of electricity alone is a significant disservice to profitability. So how do we reverse that trend?
What is actually a paradox? Which comes first? Fixing the tariff or putting the infrastructure in place? Because the infrastructure, you can only recoup the cost of your capital expenditure if you have a good tariff. But you cannot also fix a tariff that dissuades people who are going to be your customers from investing in production. If I look at the cost of production and I see that the cost is much higher here in Nigeria, I will move my infrastructure, or my production capacity elsewhere. So you see that the rate at which demand for electricity is virtually static, because there is no new investment in production. But let me tell you something. Now, people have seen that they thought that renewable energy could not power industries has been debunked. In fact, you can see a number of factories coming up in Nigeria. One is in Yola, the dairy farm powered by electricity, because people are now seeing that you can use renewable energy for large power demands when you combine it with a gas or diesel plant. It's called hybrid. And gradually, you will find people will move from the grid. It's less reliable, very expensive, to standalone power supply systems driven mainly by renewable energy. So the grid itself needs to have a rethink about the cost of electricity. And one can't really blame them because they can't be guaranteed a return over a long period of time. You need stable exchange rate to be able to sign a contract that spans 10 years, 5 years. And that is not available with a volatile exchange rate. So, which, like I said, which comes first? Fixing a tariff or putting in the infrastructure?
I mean, I'm glad you mentioned the hybrid nature. There are those who would wonder, hey, if you are in business to make money, and if that is your reality, you're in business to make money, why don't you just have that long-term thinking? Why don't you have that long-term plan of hybriding from the very beginning? Do you think that's what the investors could have thought about?
Absolutely. In fact, that is what most investors are thinking about, even established industries.
Now, I'm talking about the electricity service providers.
Well, the electricity service providers, let's remember that they inherited a lot of plants of very low efficiencies. People don't talk about it much, but the power generating infrastructure of Nigeria is actually quite inefficient.
But, you know, you said it, they inherited it. It wasn't foisted on them. They inherited because they saw the market, right? And they also knew that these weaknesses are there, these vulnerabilities are there, these gaps are there. So that's why I'm thinking, I mean, if I'm in business to make money and I know the environment well enough, I'd think of other ways of producing the same thing.
True. But ask any of the investors, they will tell you that the documents that they reviewed to sign those agreements had a little bit of optimism, or should I say, they were too optimistic. Let's talk about losses. Most of the discos, at the time they were signing agreements, talking of about 15% losses. That's technical losses, collection losses, and commercial losses, in the area of about 15%. Today, those losses will be in the range of 25 to 30%. And it's not because the investors have not tried. They've done a lot to try to bring down the losses, but the infrastructure is old. What it will cost you to completely overhaul that infrastructure is many times what they paid for those companies. And so they're not going to be looking into it. But what I see is that even people that are on the grid right now are looking of how to migrate to renewable, to hybrid plants and get off the grid for two reasons. The grid is not reliable. So if you're an industrialist producing around the clock, you don't want a situation where you lose power suddenly. It's bad for planning. And then the cost. With the tariffs today, most industries can produce cheaper power using a hybrid power plant. And that's what people are looking at. And so gradually the grid might see that rather than increasing demand for their product, you will see a declining demand.
You know, madam, let me come back to you now. So this is the situation we find ourselves in. This is where we are right now. Let's talk about some solutions. I'm glad, you know, the example that you gave of what you did on Lagos Island. Cascading that all across the nation, what do you see? What are the challenges that could come? and how do we navigate them? I heard this news sometime back, and I hope it's not true, that there were some parts of the country that were rejecting electricity because it was too much, and they wanted to pay less. I found it amusing, but I sincerely hope it is not true, because even some Gencos and even Trancos say that that is the truth. So in that kind of situation, definitely whatever micro, small businesses there might have the short end of the stick. Where do we go from there?
Thank you very much again. And yes, for the small, micro, and small, and medium-sized enterprises that we are trying to empower in the communities, if, just like I said before, power is the most important. Engineer also attested to it that power is the most important. And if power is the cost of electricity is, by the time they remove the cost of electricity from their business, there is virtually nothing left for them. So what I am trying to advocate is that because again, for even the private sector to go to the communities, to go and kind of see what they could do innovatively there, we need the government's support. There is need for environments to be created, for it to be lucrative, for private sector to be able to go. There are so many other innovative ideas that we have come up with. But unfortunately, private sectors are not ready to go there. Number one, because of the market, and then number two, because of the cost of even getting to that place compared to working in the cities and in the urban areas. So what I'm saying is that we need the government to focus on the bottom up. Because when the communities know that the government is concerned about their growth and their development economically, this issue of even migrating to the city will reduce. And then, so what we are trying to do is that train youths. See, in Nigeria, opportunities abound. And all you need to do is sit down and think, what can I do to add value? And we're talking of energy mix. There is a whole lot. We have the water, we have the solar, we have the wind, we have composting, even getting energy from natural resources, decaying materials, we can get energy from it. So these are some of the things we are promoting in the communities that, okay, yes, we are advocating for governments to come. And we are also hoping that government will create the environments for private sectors to get interested and more committed to energy that cuts across the whole of Nigeria, not just in the city. We're also training the people that we're working with on the ground to be able to come up with their own innovative idea to be able to meet, or at least meet, their energy needs to some extent.
So, well, Engineer Olania, do you agree with her?
Absolutely. Actually, both of us were involved in the project that was delivered to a community, Sagbukoji community to be precise, located offshore Lagos, which was a solar-powered cold room. I had the opportunity of firsthand seeing what rural communities go through to, just for basic living. Try and imagine someone who is into fishing, buying and selling. What begins to go through their minds when it's almost 5 o'clock and no customers are coming and you have that fish there? You have two choices. Either you prepare it as dinner for your family or you smoke it. And smoking is a very intensive activity, health-wise, and the physically demanding. So introducing a cold room or some form of refrigeration into that chain changes the entire scenario. You can ask for higher prices, and you don't have to be desperate to, smoke the fish to preserve it, keeping yourself in better health. So yes, I totally agree with her. And interestingly, the rural community in Lagos State, at least 50 to 60% are engaged in farming, either aquaculture, or growing of crops, or animal husbandry. And they need energy. They are located in remote places. And so getting energy to them, they will be willing to pay even for the services that you're bringing to them. And that is where mini-grids come into place. And quite a number of mini-grids are now being deployed across Lagos State.
The hope is that we will cascade all of that all across the nation, because that's what I would love to see. I mean, we've seen the poverty figures, the multidimensional poverty figures in the north and in the south, and it's depressing enough. Well, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you very much.
We understand that there's an energy forum?
Yes. The 9th Nigeria Energy Forum will be holding on the 9th of July at Maseleni Conference Center, Isaac John, from 9 a.m. with the theme Powering Industrial Growth. So a lot of what we talk about is going to be talked about there.
Sounds like a plan then. Thank you so much for your time this
morning.
Thank you. Engineer Olafemi Olanio is a stakeholder manager of the Nigeria Energy Forum. He's been with us here in the studio, along with Ms. Bironke Olubamise, who is the National Coordinator, Global Environment Facility Small Grants Program, implemented by the United Nations Development Program. She joined us from our Abuja studio. Thank you so much, madam, for being here. So we take another break now. When we return, we are still talking about making Nigeria better. But how? Join us after now.